Hey, welcome back to the Cobwebs channel. My name is Daniel, and today it's time for my monthly wrap-up show where I rank all of the Blu-rays and 4Ks that I watched over the past month from my least favorite to my favorite. We've got 11 movies, 11 releases on physical media. Pretty much all horror movies, retro horror, but I do have a couple of, kind of genre benders in there as well that I'm excited to talk to you about. And this is a really diverse stack in terms of how much I like these movies, because at the bottom of the list is a movie I hated, my least favorite movie I watched this year. At the top of my list is one of my absolute favorite movies I've watched this year. So let's go ahead and kick things off at number 11, which is Vacation of Terror. This is a Vinegar Syndrome release. I've got a lot of Vinegar Syndrome to talk to you guys about. But Vacation of Terror is a Mexican horror film, and it's about a family who is left a cabin in the woods, essentially in an inheritance. So they travel out to that cabin to have themselves a little vacation, check it out. And when they get there, it turns out it's a super rundown, like condemned building. It looks absolutely horrible, but all the time the dad is trying to be positive and just like, it's fine, we'll just fix it up, it'll be totally great. It does not look like it's going to be totally great. And from there, they find out that a witch was burned around there a long time ago, and the witch comes back to haunt them and possess the little girl's doll, as you can see on the cover right there. And I hated this movie. Like, I thought it was really terrible. It was the worst movie I've seen this year by far. The setup is not that bad. Definitely not. I mean, the characters aren't super interesting and some of the dialogue is a little weird, but it's all good. I didn't care. Once we get into the horror, it gets so terrible, because what it is a witch has possessed a doll, and the doll doesn't do anything. The little girl just kind of carries the doll around, and over and over again, you will get a close-up of the doll's face. Its eyes will move, and then something weird will happen, like something will float across the room, or somebody will float across the room. There's a lot of floating across the room, and that just happens over and over again, and I was bored out of my mind. I thought this was so boring, so lame. Like I said, just close-ups of this doll over and over and over again, while vaguely kind of spooky things happen around the house. Real bad. Now, this release also includes Vacation of Terror 2, and that's one reason I will not be getting rid of this, because one of these days, I'll check out Vacation of Terror 2. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I just have a feeling if I got rid of this, one day I'd be listening to a podcast, and somebody would be like, man, Vacation of Terror 2, like it's a hidden gem, so much better than the first one. And I'll be like, damn it, I got rid of that. So, can't do that, so this is staying in the collection. I bumped the mic, even though I hated the movie. At number 10, cracking into the top 10, what an honor, is Night of the Blood Monster. This is a Blue Underground 4K release, and I'll just kind of briefly show you the cover, but it's pretty darn salacious, so I don't want to risk YouTube getting mad at me. So there is the alternate artwork called The Bloody Judge. That's an alternate title. The Bloody Judge is a much better title for this than Night of the Blood Monster, much more accurate. But what I expected about this movie going into it was going to be a Witchfinder General type movie, where Christopher Lee plays a barbaric judge who condemns and sentences women to death for witchcraft. Whether they were actual witches and there's witchcraft in this movie, or whether it is just a Witchfinder General type movie where it's just all about the horror of evil men who do things in the name of God, I didn't know going in. And that description of the movie is kind of accurate, like technically, but it's much more so about a civil war going on in England between people who are loyal to the king and people who are loyal to this other guy who wants to be king. And there's just a lot of political intrigue, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, just earlier this year, I talked about Man in the Iron Mask, and that's what that whole movie is about, political intrigue on who should be king. And I loved that movie. But this is just a really badly done version of it. It's directed by Jess Franco. I've historically not been a big Jess Franco fan in my life, and this has continued that. I did not like this movie. I thought it was pretty dull, despite the fact that it has beautiful production design. Like, it's a gorgeous movie and looks incredible on 4K. And there are lots of beautiful, beautiful women to look at in this movie. But the way that this movie decides to be exploitation material is by just having these women be very scantily clad and torture them. And I don't know if that's titillating to somebody. I think that might be a problem. So this movie was like sleazy in a really not fun way. Christopher Lee was fine in the movie, but he's honestly not in it very much. It's much more so about all this political stuff going on, and sometimes women get tortured. I did not like it. This is one I can't see myself keeping in the collection much longer, even though it did look great on 4K. At number 9, I cracked into this box set from Arrow Video, Cold War Creatures. It's 4 1950s sci-fi films. And so far, I've only watched one movie in the set. So that's the only movie we're going to be talking about. And that is The Werewolf. This is a 1950s, of course, werewolf movie. One I've been excited to see for quite some time, ever since I first heard about it. And what the movie's about is this mysterious man comes into a small town, a small snowy town, which I really like the atmosphere of that. And he doesn't know who he is. Nobody there knows who he is. He's just this sad guy just wandering through town. And somebody outside a bar tries to mug him. And he tackles the guy into an alleyway. And they don't show anything. They just show their feet while they're struggling. But you can hear he's turning into a werewolf. And when he runs away, a woman reports like he became a monster. And I really like that setup. I was like, we're in for a good small town spooky werewolf movie. Like, let's go. I did end up being kind of disappointed by this movie because it turns out it's not a werewolf in the traditional sense. All of a sudden, these mad scientists, these atomic radiation 1950s style scientists show up, and supposedly they performed experiments on this guy and like merged his DNA with animal DNA, and now he's a werewolf. That's fine, but definitely a less cool version of a werewolf to me than becoming a wolf when the full moon is bright and the wolfbane blooms, right? That's just that kind of folk horror kind of feel. That's what I love for werewolves. And this took it in a more science fiction route. Okay. But man, this movie turned out to be boring. It's got some good stuff going for it. The werewolf design is not bad, even though he's mostly wandering around in broad daylight, so there's like no atmosphere to the werewolf scenes. But the characters are really boring in this movie, and the movie felt really long to me, even though it's really short. Like, how long is this movie? 79 minutes, and I could not believe how long it felt. As there's just scene after scene of the werewolf just kind of wandering around while this big old police force is trying to hunt him down. It kind of feels like a Western in that way, but like, I like Westerns, so that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But I guess the characters were just so dull. So I thought this was okay, but it was not the great werewolf movie that I was hoping to find another black and white werewolf movie that I could really fall in love with. But looking forward to checking out the other movies in this box set, especially The Giant Claw, which I've heard is quite the so bad it's good kind of experience from a lot of people. All right, so we're into number 8. Let's talk about Night of the Living Dead, directed by Tom Savini from 1990. Yes, this is the remake of the classic George Romero film, and this was a pretty good movie, a pretty decent remake. My only hang up with it is I just feel like it's so unnecessary because it is so close to the original George Romero film from 1968. So close that I kind of don't understand what the point of it is. Like, there's only really 2 updates that you get. One of which is you get much more 1990s zombie gore effects. And that's pretty cool. The zombies looked good. There's definitely some good zombie content in this movie, so I give that a pass. And the other one is that the character of Barbara is changed quite a bit. While Barbara is catatonic in the original Night of the Living Dead, which, by the way, I think is a very reasonable response to the absolutely horrifying stuff that's going on in Night of the Living Dead. I don't think less of Barbara for going catatonic in the face of that. Like, that's understandable. But here she turns into much more of a badass, and I would say the main character. Ben, who's played by Tony Todd in this version, great to see Tony Todd, definitely takes a backseat to Barbara. And that's fine. And honestly, Barbara ended up being my favorite character in the movie. I mean, she's the most interesting, most proactive character. So I liked her in the movie. I just don't think that's a necessary change because I don't think there's anything wrong with the way they did Barbara the first time. So the movie just, it feels like kind of a waste of time because I have the original and I just can't imagine ever watching the remake again instead of just watching that original. But all that being said, it's a pretty darn good version. It kind of feels like going to see the play Night of the Living Dead at a different theater than you saw it at the first time. And there's a different cast and there's slightly different production design, but it's the same play. And there's some enjoyment to be had there. So I had a decent time watching this movie. Definitely can't lie about that. Okay, at number 7, we've got The Boogens on 4K from Kino Lorber. I was really excited to get this 1981 creature feature because they actually played this at a 24-hour horror marathon that I went to many years ago. And they played it in the middle of the night, and I slept through it. But I remember occasionally waking up, looking at the screen, and just like seeing little bits and pieces of the Boogins. And I've just kind of always remembered that, partially for what a memorable title the Boogins is. It just sounds so silly. So when Kino Lorber announced they were releasing this on 4K, I knew I had to get it. I had to finally watch the Boogins. Now I have, and it's pretty fun. I like this movie. I definitely enjoyed it. It's got a great snowy small town atmosphere to it. It takes place in a very rural mining town during the winter. And I really liked the characters in this. You got a couple of young guys who are working as miners. The girlfriend of one of them comes into town and brings a friend. So the guy's trying to get the friend with his friend. And they're just like a pair of adorable couples. And I thought they were lots of fun to watch in this. Really liked the actors. They just seemed like great people. And so this was just a great hangout movie with the atmosphere and the characters. I just really enjoyed it. And that's why I didn't mind that the Boogins don't show up really, and that you can totally see them until like the last 10 minutes. Now the Boogins do things throughout the movie, but you just don't see them. So you don't know exactly what's happening, like who is killing these people. But I like the Boogins. Once they showed them, they kind of looked like turtles with tentacles, and I just thought they were fun. So this was just an enjoyable little creature feature. One that I don't think needed to be on 4K. On the back, it says brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the 35mm original camera negative. Man, all that sounds good. But it didn't actually look all that good, and I think it comes down to the way this movie was shot. I just don't think it was lit very well. Like, I don't think the lighting was very good. I don't think they shot it very well. So I don't know if there's that much you really could do with it in 4K to really make it look beautiful. The outside stuff looks beautiful. The inside stuff looks kind of rough. So I don't think it needed to be on 4K, but do I regret getting it on 4K? Not really. Like, I'm happy to have it. The Boogins is fun, and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. At number 6, we've got the Amicus anthology Torture Garden. And I did a full review of this on the channel last month because I'm doing a series on all of the Amicus anthology horror films, and I'm really enjoying doing that series. And Torture Garden is the second one. It's from 1967, and it's a pretty good movie, particularly the second half. It's got 4 segments. The first 2 segments are pretty weak. The second 2 segments are pretty great. So I'm overall pretty positive on this movie, even though, you know, it's definitely got a rocky start. But the last segment with Peter Cushing and Jack Palance as a couple of Edgar Allan Poe super fans who are collecting all of his stuff, and it leads them down some dark paths by the end. Super, super fun. So check out my full review of this movie if you haven't seen it yet. That is on the channel right now. Now we're cracking into the top 5, and we got a bunch of Vinegar Syndrome to talk about. So starting off, we've got Buried Alive. This is a slasher movie, really, from 1989, but it's really a merging of an 80s slasher and a Edgar Allan Poe gothic horror film. And it's pretty good. It's a pretty good version of those two things. I really enjoyed this. It's about a young woman who comes to work at an all-girls school for troubled girls. I feel like I've seen a lot of horror movies recently about an all-girls school of troubled girls. Anyway, she comes to work as a teacher, and Robert Vaughn is the headmaster there. Donald Pleasance is a psychiatrist there. So it's got a pretty great supporting cast in here. And kids keep going missing, and she starts investigating this and trying to find out, did they actually run away like Robert Vaughn said they did? Or is it possible they're getting murdered? Yes, they are getting murdered. The movie tells you that like right away. There's a masked killer going around killing people in some pretty gnarly ways. Like the kills are pretty fantastic, particularly one where a girl gets her hair caught in some kind of a curling iron and it like pulls her entire scalp off. There's some pretty good practical effects that are pretty gnarly in this movie. I really respected it. And I thought the performances were quite good. Robert Vaughn is kind of like our Vincent Price. If this was a Vincent Price Edgar Allan Poe film, that's the role that he plays. I thought he did a pretty good job. And this is actually John Carradine's last movie. I was watching an interview on the Vinegar Syndrome disc with one of the actors, and she talked about how John Carradine, when he showed up on set, he didn't really know where he was, who he was. He was really on his last legs, and it was very sad. I don't know if he even should have been in this movie. And apparently he passed away on his way home. So very sad. Respect to John Carradine, though, an absolute horror legend. And you do get to see him, although briefly, in Buried Alive. So this is a good one from Vinegar Syndrome, and I definitely recommend it. At number 4 is Night Screams. This is a Vinegar Syndrome 4K release that I actually just talked about in my top 10 80s slasher movies you might have missed video. I put this movie on the list because I super enjoyed this movie. I thought it was so fun. It's definitely a low budget regional slasher movie shot in, I think it's Wichita, Kansas, if I'm remembering right. And it definitely has a very authentic small town country feel that I really enjoyed. I like that kind of atmosphere. And the actors, although definitely some rough acting in this movie, not from everybody, but there's a good bit of rough acting. I didn't mind because the actors just felt like they were having a real good time. Like everybody just seemed like they were having fun. This movie was a good vibe from start to finish. You got some pretty good kills in this movie, particularly one involving a guy barbecuing a hamburger that goes real wrong. And the movie's actually got a decent mystery. The movie sets up several different ways that the end reveal could be, several different options of who's doing this killing. And it sets them up pretty well. And when they picked one of the options, I didn't think it was like the most obvious thing. So I respected it. I really enjoyed Night Screams, and it looked fantastic on 4K. Weird thing about this movie is the theatrical version, which is what's on 4K, actually splices in scenes from different movies like Graduation Day and some adult films those parts are honestly pretty cringy. But you can easily tell what was added in because basically characters will periodically just sit down on the couch, watch TV, and it'll show what they're watching on TV, and it'll be clips from other movies. The producers made the directors do that, I think because they thought the movie wasn't long enough or they thought it didn't have enough exploitation content. But you can watch the original director's vision, the shorter cut, on a Blu-ray disc on this release. All right, it's time for the top 3, and my number 3 is my favorite Vinegar Syndrome release that I watched over the past month. That is the Iceman Cometh.
The Iceman Cometh.
This is a Hong Kong fantasy action movie from the 1980s. And the way I describe this movie, it's basically Kate and Leopold, but with awesome action. Do you guys remember Kate and Leopold from the early 2000s, where Hugh Jackman plays this nobleman from olden times? I don't remember exactly from where, who time travels to the future. He kind of meets up with Meg Ryan, who's like this modern worldly woman, and she kind of shows him the ropes of modern society, and they end up falling in love, and it's a cute rom-com. At least I remember it being kind of a cute rom-com. It's been a long time. That's basically exactly what this movie is, except with awesome action scenes. It's about these two brothers in, I believe, the Ming Dynasty, long time ago in China, who are fighting each other because one of them has become very evil and the other one's very noble. And they end up getting frozen in the ice during their battle. And then they get de-thawed in 1980s Hong Kong. And the bad guy runs off to go get into crime and cause chaos. And the good guy meets with a sex worker who is basically the worldly woman who shows him the ropes of modern society. And they have like this romance, pretty cute romance, honestly, not gonna lie. But meanwhile, there's some awesome action scenes as he's going to find his evil brother. This movie's fantastic. I really enjoyed it. It's one of those Hong Kong movies that definitely splices in a lot of comedy in with all the action and intensity, but most of the comedy worked just fine for me. I thought it was a lot of fun, and the action is spectacular. There's particularly a lot of sword fighting. Man, one of the coolest things that you can possibly see in a movie is sword fighting. It's one of my favorite things ever, and really great sword fights in this. So The Iceman Cometh is a pretty darn fantastic Hong Kong movie. I've been really enjoying getting into Hong Kong films over this year, really. And my biggest vehicle for getting into them has been Vinegar Syndrome. So I'm starting to get to the point where, like, if I can get a Hong Kong Vinegar Syndrome release for a decent price, I want to go for it. I want it. So I really enjoyed that movie. At number 2 is a movie that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. I do allow movies I haven't seen before on these lists that I do, as long as it's on a Blu-ray release I've not watched yet. And that was the case for M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, which is my number 2. I hadn't seen this movie since I was a kid, and I just picked up the Blu-ray and rewatched it because I wanted to talk about it in my video I did on my top 10 farmland horror movies. And this movie blew me away all over again. Like, I just loved it so much. It stars Mel Gibson as a man who just recently lost his wife, and he's living with his brother, Joaquin Phoenix. They're both trying to raise his kids. And wouldn't you know it, aliens land. They start to notice there's aliens around very close by. They're watching the news, and everyone's reporting on all of these alien and UFO sightings. And it's basically a traditional War of the Worlds style alien invasion movie, but from the perspective of low-level everyday people who don't really know what's going on. They focus so well on character relationships and emotions. I find this to be a really emotional movie, and such a beautiful way, especially all the stuff about fatherhood. I just thought it was incredible. And it's scary. Like, it's legitimately a scary alien movie because they hold back for so long on showing the alien, but you'll just get little glimpses here and there. Like, they're all really, really creepy. Like, this movie is almost as effective as Jaws at like holding back the monster until just the right moment. But unlike Jaws, once you do get to see the alien, it doesn't look fantastic. It's definitely, 2002 CGI. And that's really my only downside with this movie is when you see the alien, it's very dated CGI. And by the way, I've heard some people are really clamoring to get this on 4K, which, I can kind of understand, but also this Blu-ray, this old Blu-ray release looks fantastic. A beautiful Blu-ray. Like, are they not trying as hard with Blu-rays now as they were in 2002? Or I guess whenever this Blu-ray release came out, probably like 2010, something like that. I don't know. All I'm saying is I'm not holding my breath for a 4K because this is a fantastic looking release. Really enjoyed it. But my number one is a new discovery, and that is the Paramount Presents Blu-ray of Breakdown. Breakdown is a 1997 thriller starring Kurt Russell as a man who is on this long road trip with his wife. They're actually moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, so they're driving across the country. At the moment we start in the movie, they're driving in desert country and their car breaks down. And this trucker, this semi-truck, pulls over to see if they need any help. And he offers to give them a ride into town, but Kurt Russell doesn't want to leave the car alone because they met some creepy guys at a gas station. So he lets the wife hop into the truck. So the truck driver can take the wife into town and she can call a tow truck, but he can stay with the car to make sure the car is safe. But he gets the car up and running again on his own. So he drives into that truck stop where the truck driver was going to drop his wife off at, and his wife is not there. And now he has to try to find her. And the movie is this epic, intense journey of watching him trying to find his wife. And I loved this movie so much. This is one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. Like, honestly, like, I know that sounds like hyperbole, but this was like a jumping out of my skin, stand up and shout at the TV kind of intense experience. And it just blew me away. It's like it's a masterpiece. Like, I think it's like, I don't know what more a movie has to do to get 5 stars from somebody. I'm being a little salty because when I looked on Letterboxd after I gave this 5 stars, I saw nobody I follow gave it 5 stars. So I don't get it. I thought this was a perfect, tight, effective thriller right around 90 minutes. It just builds in intensity so well. It's constantly building and building and building. And by the end, it's this incredible high intensity climax action, just unbelievable. Kurt Russell is so great in this movie as just an everyman who rises to the occasion. This Paramount Presents Blu-ray is apparently pretty rare, I found out. Especially with the slipcover. Paramount Presents Blu-rays have these cool slipcovers that fold out and you see the original poster. And there is some alternate cover art right there. But yeah, this is a thriller that blew me away. It's the scariest movie I've seen in a long time. And it's not even technically a horror movie, but an incredible thriller. Breakdown is my number one movie or Blu-ray release, whatever you want to say, that I saw last April. So that's my list, folks, but I want to know yours. Let me know what you've been watching down in the comments below. Let's talk about some movies. And if you want to stick around the channel longer, go ahead and click on this playlist right down here. That's got all the rest of my monthly Blu-ray watch list wrap-up videos that I've done since I started this series well over a year ago. Give a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. With all that said, don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I will see you next time.